So welcome back, everybody. Thanks for staying with us. Before I introduce the next speaker, just a reminder that places are still available on our afternoon workshops. So you can join those by using the buttons underneath the screen. And also we'd be really interested to capture your reflections on the week on your postcards. And if you look in the delegate bag, you can see there for instructions on how to do that. So our next session is about supporting people through periods of change and uncertainty. So we're going to now enjoy an interactive masterclass on how to support people through change and uncertainty, which is delivered by Rob Baker, who is the founder of Tailored Thinking. So thank you, Rob, and welcome, and over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, John. And I'm delighted to be participating in what is an amazing week you've created for people, and I'm hoping that people will find this session engaging, useful and practical. So I appreciate that when people sign up for these things, and I do this myself, we do it with the best of intentions, thinking I will have time to do this with my full energy and my engagement, and that it will be fantastic. And yet I know in reality that I'm competing against lots of emails, lots of kind of other noise that people have personally, professionally at this moment in time. So I recognize it. I'd like to say thank you to anyone and everyone who's joining in. And in return for your attention today, in return for your investment in this session, I will do my absolute best to ensure that it's as practical, as useful as possible. And the way to do that, the way I can do that, is by sharing some ideas with you, sharing some stories with you, but I'm also happy to receive kind of input from you as we're going along. So there'll be a couple of points where I'll ask some questions, the opportunity for you to feed those in, and others might kind of share those with me as we're going along. So if there's things that I'm talking about that you're particularly interested in or have questions on, please feel free to raise those in the chat. And if we don't get to them as I'm going along, then hopefully there'll be time at the end for us to follow through with those. I've got some slides as well that I will be kind of using to go through to help inform our conversation as we're going through. I've got copies of these slides that I'll be sharing with everyone, and additionally I include some references and resources within this, so you can go as deep into this stuff that I'm sharing as you would like to. So that's my kind of invitation to you, to get as deeply involved and think about this as much as you possibly like. But I just wanted to say, to start with, I thank you so much for showing up, and I recognize and appreciate your time and your energy today. So thank you for that. So if we could have the slides on, then I'll share them through with you. So what I want to do today is to share with you all some practical ideas, some evidence-based ideas that you will be able to kind of apply within your own world and setting, kind of personally and professionally, but also would also to enable you to have conversations, to think about how you support and enable your colleagues as well during this kind of challenging and unprecedented time. I'm sure you've probably played bingo. If you're playing bingo during the conference, and I'm not the first to say unprecedented, but I think there's no rule book for what's happening at the moment. So this is my best attempt for sharing with you some frameworks, some ideas that you can help kind of create your own rules in terms of supporting yourself and supporting colleagues through what we're doing. So I'm just going to go through the slides with you. And these are the references that the kind of resources that you'll see, and some references as well. And there's lots. Again, I could literally present you with an avalanche of research behind this. I don't want to kind of swamp you in it, but if you're interested in the ideas, then just let me know and I'll do my best to follow up. And I'm very happy for people to follow up with me individually after this session. You can do that through email. I think my email address is on here somewhere, but if not, through social media, LinkedIn or Twitter, please do say hello. I tend to share information about how to make kind of work better from an individual, a leadership or an organizational perspective. So I'm talking to you today from Durham. So my daughter's bedroom at the moment, we co-share a working space, which seems to be very trendy in terms of co-sharing. And so I'm in my daughter's bedroom at the moment in Durham, but we do have offices in Durham. So Tailored Thinking, my company, positive psychology, wellbeing and HR consultancy, And we strive to bring evidence and science to bear within organizations to make work better, and be that for individuals, be that for organizations, be that for teams. And we were delighted and frankly a bit amazed actually to last year have been awarded the HR Consultancy of the Year award by the CIPD. So that's Europe's kind of biggest HR professional body that can recognise the work that we've been doing in this field. So we're delighted by that. And just to kind of say a little bit about my context, why I'm talking to you today. My background's been working within human resources and within different organisations and settings, from that private sector, the public sector, universities and hospitals, kind of banks, lots of different. Over my career, I've had the opportunity to work in lots of different sectors and organisations, but I've always been curious about what is it that enables people to perform at their best in different settings. And I was working at the University of Melbourne, so in a role internally at the University of Melbourne, where I was presented with the opportunity to do some further study. And I studied for my master's in positive psychology at the Centre of Positive Psychology in the University of Melbourne. And a lot of my thinking that I'm going to share with you, as I'll come on to, has been shaped by my experiences in Melbourne. And when I came back to the UK, I wanted to think about how we could apply some of these ideas within workplaces. So that's enough about maybe context setting and scene setting. What you're interested about, what we're going to talk about today within the time that we have together, the 50 minutes or so we've got left now. I want to talk about how we can positively respond to challenge. That's the kind of the nutshell in terms of what that looks like. That's what we said on the session today. But I also want us to kind of, as part of that, I want us to be curious and explore what is well-being. So actually, what does that mean for us? What does it mean for other people? And why that's important when we're dealing with change and uncertainty. And then I want to think about actually what are some practical ways that we can offer to people to kind of take a bit more control of their work. And I've included this section because I'm finding with the organizations that I'm working with, a lot of people feeling they're not totally in control of what's happening at the moment. And that makes complete sense. And I find it can be very empowering for individuals to think about how they can try and take a little bit more control of their day. So I'll share some ideas about how to do that. And then at the end of this, I will share an exercise, an invitation for you to think about actually how you can maybe play with some of these ideas to try and make a positive change in terms of improving your own well-being. And I'm saying this in terms of improving your well-being because actually I think one of the things we can do when we're dealing with change and uncertainty is again to try and take an element of control in terms of our own well-being. And I'm going to share with you a practical exercise that I often do with larger groups, but I wanted to share that with you today to see if it kind of resonated and see if it's something that you would find interesting and useful. So there's an invitation at the end of the session for you to make a small experiment to improve your own well-being, to take more control during this climate of uncertainty that we're facing at this moment in time. And I'd just like people to reflect, and I don't think I'll see all the kind of answers on my screen back here, but I want you to reflect on how are people feeling in your organization and how do you want people to feel. So what you can do if you're sharing this, if you want to kind of share this and you're able to in terms of your screens or however you're getting this content, you might want to just kind of contribute now. So maybe you might want to add in terms of a comment here around how generally you seeing that people are feeling at this moment in time, and how do you want people to feel. So you might put a 1 next to how are people currently feeling, and a 2 kind of how do you want people to feel. And if people are able to, they can share some of these responses to me. I'd like to kind of maybe get a snapshot of those different perspectives. But I think it's useful for us all to kind of take the time to actually reflect on how our colleagues are showing up at the moment in workplaces, how are they feeling. So those 2 questions I think are useful to explore and reflect on. And I'll just pause for a second before I talk about some of the common answers I get to that. So I'll see if I get anything that I see comes up. Okay. So what I'm finding within a lot of kind of organizational context at the moment, and see if we kind of resonates with some of the responses we're getting through is that there's a fatigue, there's a tiredness that we naturally have within organizations at the moment. A lot of people have been working in very different ways with different pressures, either doing their same job but in different circumstances with different rules to navigate, with different pressures to navigate, or they've been doing their job in a different environment. So for a lot of us, that's maybe been working from home if we're desk-based in terms of what we're doing. And a lot of people have found that that's created additional kind of pressures or additional kind of energy drainers, because they're having to do things in different ways, and they may be having to do additional aspects of work. So a common thing that I'm finding to people is that they're tired. They are feeling they are having an element of fatigue. Another common thing that I'm seeing at the moment is that people are feeling guilty. So in terms of this idea of guilt and the fact that actually they're not able to respond to the demands that they're facing, be that personally, in terms of their family perspective, and in terms of looking after their own health. And it can also be in terms of their the guilt around kind of professionally as well, is the fact that actually they're not as motivated or as engaged with their work that they'd like to, or maybe delivering at the higher quality they can because of their circumstances. And I'm seeing some of the responses coming through at the moment in terms of uncertain, in terms of how people are feeling at the moment. Someone's really kind of put from Sarah, I've just seen someone was saying tired at the moment. So Sarah, you kind of your response really resonates with what I'm saying at the moment. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm just seeing some other coming through. So someone's saying fed up as well, and I kind of resonate with that. So yeah, some people are kind of feeling fed up, tired, and just frustrated in terms of their circumstances. And people want them to be more energized. People want to be more hopeful. I think Sally said she wants people to be people want to be safe, in terms of feeling safe, in terms of secure, in terms of their circumstances. And I mean, I'm sure that means in lots of different ways, kind of from a health perspective, but from a job perspective maybe as well. So these are really kind of common sentiments. And what I want us to do today is share with you again some ideas around how we can move people from feeling this idea of maybe just kind of guilty and tired and run down, and what can we do to kind of help people move in the direction that we want people to be, in terms of more helpful, hopeful, more energized, feeling kind of safer. And I think one thing to highlight, I think is important, is that there's no one thing that you can do to do this. There's no magic bullet to enable this to happen. The best organizations that I've seen, the best leaders who are doing this, the best individuals that are doing this, I found they're kind of actually saying, look, this is where we want to get to. This is why I want you to get to. And this is kind of how some of the things we're going to try, but we may not get everything right. And we need to have an open and regular dialogue with people to understand whether we're working in the right direction. As one of the sessions I was in recently, I heard someone say the phrase that the leaders of the moment, the best leaders of the moment, aren't the ones with the best answers, but they're the ones with the best questions. And I think at this moment in time, we need to be really kind of questioning ourselves, but questioning our colleagues about how we can move towards where we want to kind of get to, in terms of from an energy perspective, from a well-being perspective, but from a performance perspective as well. I'm just going to, before I move on, I'm just going to see a couple of the other comments that are kind of coming through. Yeah, and I think just one point that I've just seen from Emily kind of sharing is around this idea that we're seeing lots of peaks and troughs and crashes and ups and downs, and we want people to feel a bit more of a steadier state. And that totally resonates with me. And again, there's only so much we can control, or so much as the leaders you can try and control and support you can provide to people. But I think one of the things that can be curious about is around how much noise are you adding to the picture from an organization at the moment? Because one of the things that a lot of people are doing, most organizations are ambitious, they've got agendas they want to kind of deliver that are important agendas, and because of that there's always things to do. But actually I think there's a space here, there's a time, there's an opportunity to really kind of connect with people and ask some interesting questions about how people are, what we want to learn from what's happening, and think about ways of trying to dampen down some of that noise, so those kind of oscillations. And it's not easy, I know that, and I haven't got all the answers to, but I think being curious about that, recognizing that, is something that's really, really helpful and important. I mentioned that my thinking, a lot of the ideas I'm going to share with you come from positive psychology. So some of you will be familiar with this, but for those who aren't, I'll just very briefly kind of introduce. So the positive psychology is a subset of the field of psychology that started to gain traction and was first written about with deliberately in about 1999, 2000, where it was a challenge to a lot of the traditional research around of psychological kind of focus, which had been treating people who are in negative states and trying to make them better, and by better, kind of normal, if that makes sense. And actually what positive psychology is saying is actually, why can't we encourage everyone, no matter where they are, to get to be in a slightly better, more positive state than they are currently? So rather than just looking at people who have been in negative situations and making them okay, what positive psychology is interested in doing is saying, irrespective of kind of where people are, what are the ways, the opportunities to move people forward from where they are to where they want to go? So you spend time studying people who are performing at their best as well, and trying to see what we can learn from those individuals. And my particular kind of area within positive psychology is positive organizational scholarship, or positive organizational design, which is around actually how you apply these ideas to organizations. Now, this is a slide that I get really excited about, and it's around different factors that impact on well-being and the different kind of elements of this and performance. But I find that a lot of people tend to kind of glaze out a little bit when I share this in terms of the different factors that impact on people's well-being. So what I've tended to use instead is this slide, which is showing that the core messages from the other slide, which is there's lots of different factors that will impact on people's well-being from an organizational perspective. Some of those will be external to the organization in terms of people's personal circumstances, but also internally the organization, it's around the individual themselves, the teammates and the colleagues that they interact with and their managers, and also the kind of organizational setting itself in the context. So the way that I encourage people to think about well-being, the way that I encourage people to think about supporting individuals to perform at their best, is through these three lenses. So the me lens, which is the individual, so in terms of how that individual is, what you can do to support that individual. The we lens, which is around how the colleagues, teams impact on that person's well-being, but also how that team influences the well-being of other people across the organization themselves. And then the us element is around actually what does kind of culturally, from a policy perspective, from a systems perspective, what are the factors that influence on people's well-being. So you might have an organization that has a really amazing well-being kind of commitment, or a commitment to supporting people, a very people-led approach, which is amazing. But if you've got a team manager who doesn't kind of believe in those and actually operates in a very different way, then that will have an impact on that person's an individual's well-being potentially. Or otherwise, you might have some organizations that haven't got a track record for being really invested in people in terms of actually supporting individuals, but you will have line managers who really espouse that and show that on a day-to-day basis, and that can have a positive impact on people's well-being. So I think it's one thing to take away from this. I want you to be curious about is always challenge yourself to try and look at any issues from those three different perspectives: organizationally, kind of from collegially, from a team perspective, from a management perspective, and from an individual perspective. And I was inspired by Aaron Jardin to look to this me, we, and us model. When it comes to dealing with uncertainty and change, I introduced a model called buoyancy. So to start with, when most people are faced with uncertainty, are faced with challenges, we tend to operate a bit like a lighthouse. So if you think about these waves crashing over the lighthouse, and the waves being the challenges, and wow, haven't there been some challenges that we've all faced in the last 12 months? These have been unrelenting. These challenges that we've been facing, and they've come in lots of different shapes and sizes. And we tend to naturally just respond by just standing tall and stoic and hoping that they will go away. And for some people, this is sustainable. For most people, that's not sustainable in the long term, particularly if we've had kind of waves and waves of challenges being kind of washed over us. And for some of us, kind of, if we do this, we will kind of crumble and fall. We're not going to be able to withstand that. For a lot of us, if we just act in that way, we will tend to have an impact on our mood and our engagement and our kind of happiness. We'll find our energy levels, our motivations, our kind of happiness levels reducing and dipping a little bit if we just trying to be kind of resilient to what's happening without actually doing anything. And what I want to encourage you to think about is actually trying to be buoyant and encourage your employees and your teammates to be buoyant. And by buoyancy, if you think about a buoy doesn't kind of ignore the wave. So the buoy moves with the waves. It doesn't ignore the kind of external context. And in fact, sometimes it gets battered by them in terms of what's going on, but it doesn't get swept away, and it stays kind of resolute to kind of where it is broadly. And it does that because it's tethered to the ocean floor by an anchor. And I want you to kind of think about in terms of this anchor being your mindset, your behaviors, your activities, and when it comes to your well-being, when it comes to your kind of personal levels of resilience. And we know that each of us listening will have a different natural size anchor. So there's no right or wrong size of our kind of resiliency or buoyant anchors. It's different for each of us. But what we do know is that with practice and with effort, we can strengthen and improve our own kind of buoyance levels, our resiliency levels. And I mentioned kind of with effort deliberately there, in the fact that one of the challenges, and this is a real kind of a wicked problem that we face currently, is that in order to kind of look after ourselves and in order to look after other people, this requires energy. And yet for a lot of us, when we have low energy, we don't want to necessarily look after ourselves and look after other people. And there is no kind of magic bullet to this in terms of how you solve that inherent problem. But what I do want to kind of, the way that I would encourage people to look at it and the way that I find works in the context at the moment is to get people to make really small positive changes or actions that they know are kind of, again, heading in the right direction, rather than necessarily being the big thing that's going to solve all their issues. So it could be around actually making sure people have breaks, for you, maybe having breaks in the day, might be having a conversation with a colleague when you need to have that conversation. Could be making sure you don't check emails in the evening. It'll be different for everyone, but what's the smallest possible thing that you can do to kind of actually try and find some energy, find some resiliency in terms of what you're doing to make you more buoyant. And this slide here, again, with the chat, I don't know if there'll be a delay here, but I'll just see if anyone can guess what I wanted to take away from this slide. If people can kind of crack, it's probably quite a bad picture, so forgive me if any of you are graphic designers when I put this together. Can anyone guess what I mean by this image? I'll see if anyone comes in. Yeah, Laura, just saying there's a slight delay, so I'll give you just a little bit of time to think about this. And a few people are saying they're stumped in terms of this. So for me, what I've put in here is the E for the energy and the infinite sign. And what I want to describe within this picture is that our energy isn't infinite. And I think a lot of people, a lot of leaders, and myself included within this, have kind of assumed that our energy is kind of limitless. If we just push ourselves into everything that's going on, we will get through this. And there has to be an element of that in terms of that investment and these incredibly challenging circumstances. We need to put elements of our full selves into what we're doing. And Emily's got this. I've just seen, Emily, I haven't got gold stars, but if I had gold stars, you would have some. If we can find a way for the organisation team to kind of to give virtual gold stars, that's what we'll be doing for you, Emily. That's it at the moment. We need to kind of really recognise this and recognise that our energy isn't infinite. And I think there's a cost to this in the fact that in terms of what's happening, people talked about being tired, fed up, frustrated in terms of the current circumstances. That's not going to go away as soon as everyone in this country is vaccinated or everyone in this world is vaccinated. There's going to be a long tail to what's happening. in terms of these current circumstances. So there's been a kind of an energy deficit, and we need to think very carefully as leaders, as individuals, around how we're going to recharge ourselves. So if you think about what's happening as a bit of a marathon at the moment in time, people said at the start of the pandemic, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. I think that's absolutely been the case. But no matter who you are, no matter how fit you are, no matter how resilient you are, no matter how buoyant you are, if you look at the London Marathon and look at the pictures of everyone at the end of the marathon, every single person, no matter the winner to the last place, is tired. Everyone is flagging, and I think so. We've all been running this marathon. We haven't got to the end of it yet, and we're all tired, irrespective of how fit we are, irrespective of our circumstances. And when you finish a marathon, the advice, it might have changed slightly, but when I did this 10 years ago, the advice was you shouldn't run for maybe up to a month afterwards, or give yourself a month to recover from a marathon, because it was this big effort. And I wonder how many organizations, I wonder how many of you are thinking about how we're going to allow people to do that recovery phase. Because I think if we just jump straight into doing more of new stuff, and we might be tempted to want to do that, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to refresh and recover, we're going to be have store up problems for us all within an organizational context. So from a running perspective, you get something can lead to chronic fatigue, which is kind of like a very debilitating issue. From a workplace perspective, you can see this through illnesses, sickness, absences, and mental kind of health problems. It's a really big issue that I think, again, I haven't got the magic answer for you here, but we need to think about the fact of how you're going to give people opportunities to energize and engage in terms of what we're doing. Okay. Just very briefly, I wanted to say a little bit about our brains, and this will link into how we're feeling at this moment in time. So our brains, when we've put people in MRI scans and get them to do tasks and interview them in lots of different contexts, when people are feeling at their best from a work perspective, when they're doing their best ideas, or when they're feeling their best of their life perspective, there tends to be kind of common traits in that person's circumstances that kind of sets them up for that. So when we find that people are able to do their best thinking, feeling their best in terms of positive emotions, when they are feeling safe and secure in terms of their circumstances, when they feel the future is kind of maybe looking positive and is relatively predictable, and when people kind of feel a sense of control and agency of what's happening to them, when they feel that they're in control and driving what's happening, they feel good. And it won't kind of be a big surprise for many of us that actually those things aren't available at this moment in time. So a lot of us, our future is not predictable. They're saying there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't know what that quite looks like at the moment in time for us. We haven't got freedom of control in terms of what we're doing. We're having to work differently. We're working in different locations. Where we're working is dictated for a lot of us in terms of our kind of current circumstances. That freedom, that element of control are gone. It's certainly not fair for everyone, which is another factor that kind of shines that we see when people are kind of feeling good. It's how the pandemic is impacting us is not evenly distributed, and the reason I'm saying this is the fact that it's unlikely that any of us will be doing our best thinking at this moment in time, have our best levels of energy at this moment in time, even though some of us, because of our circumstances, won't be as impacted negatively, and they would have found some hidden joys or even hidden pleasures in what's happening to us. I doubt that any of us will be feeling at our absolute best. Or if you are feeling great now, then the good news is that when in the future, when we have more freedom of movement, more freedom of control, less of a spectre of the pandemic behind us, you might feel even better if you can learn from what experiences that you've had. And so I'm flagging this because we need to continue to be, and I know a lot of you are already on this kind of call. The fact you're here today probably shows this in practice, but you need to continue to be compassionate and kind to yourself, and you need to be compassionate and kind to our colleagues. We probably haven't got as much. It's going to take us longer to think about things. We're going to be clumsier in our communication with each other. We might get more frustrated more easily. And that's just human nature and a set of circumstances of how we are and who we are at this moment in time. And again, the reason I'm flagging this now is that we're trying to make maybe some decisions at this moment in time, strategic decisions, operational decisions, managerial decisions at this moment in time. And we're doing it at a time when this pandemic, we're still in the midst of it. And so give yourself permission as well to think about, to review any decisions you're making at this time, or any actions you're doing at this moment in time, review them in 12 months time or 18 months time, and making sure that actually they are the best circumstances for you. So a lot of organizations are thinking about where people are going to be working when they can, when there's freedom of movement available to them, and they're betting on, say, hybrid working, or they're saying some people are loving working from home, or they're loving working, they want to work in the office. And I think we've got to take that with a pinch of salt, in the fact that any data you're getting, any feedback you're getting from individuals is still happening in the midst of this pandemic. So you need to continue to be curious about, actually, does the stories you're told, your kind of the things that you have been kind of, maybe you've been told by your employees, are they still the same things post-pandemic as well? So that's something to think about. So what is well-being, and why does this matter in terms of dealing with change and uncertainty? So I think in terms of the best things that we can give to people in change and uncertainty, we can't give people certainty, we can't give people necessarily clarity, but what we can give people is permission and invitation to try and take some control of their kind of current, of their circumstances. And we can try and do things as well to try and, as a team and with our colleagues, lift our collective kind of well-being and set us up as positive as we can. And when I talk about well-being, I'm not just talking about feeling good, but also functioning well. So for me, well-being means feeling good, it means functioning well. There's two components to it. When we feel good, we tend to perform better. And when we perform better, we get a sense of kind of achievement and accomplishment, and that feeds into us feeling better too. And as a consequence of this, I think you can't unpick performance and well-being. I think they're intrinsically linked. And so again, when you want, for your team, for an individual, if you want people to perform well at their in an organizational perspective, you can't get away from looking at well-being. And the model here, the PERMA model, is probably the most well-researched of one of the models of well-being out there, but it's also one of the ones that I find that your organizations can use the best. So it's one of the most accessible. So PERMA is made up of 5 different elements, and I've added one to the end of this. As I'm going through this list, if you're listening to this, and then individual exercise, just think about how you're tracking on each of these different elements at this moment in time. So the PERMA model, which was developed by Martin Seligman, is not saying well-being is one thing, but actually is made of lots of different aspects. And so the 5 aspects that he thinks from research are particularly important are these five different pillars. The first is positive emotions. This is feeling happiness and engagement and energy, vitality, zest in terms of our day-to-day life. The opposite of this is feeling low, is feeling lack of energy, it's feeling potentially kind of depressed, as it were, low mood. And again, when people feel good, they tend to do good thinking. There's a correlation there between them. They tend to be able to want to interact with other people and connect with other people. And again, when the contrary elements of this is there, when people have low positive emotions, they don't want to engage with other people necessarily as much. They don't necessarily want to share ideas or do that kind of thinking. And for some people, positive emotions is super important in their lives. So my brother, he is someone who, if he hasn't laughed in the day or made someone laugh, it impacts on him as an individual. He's very extroverted. It's something that's just part of who he is. For me, although I'm a positive business psychologist, I'm actually quite curmudgeonly. Some day-to-day aspect, I'm kind of low happiness. I like to smile, I like to engage with people, but I don't necessarily laugh day in, day out. I'm not necessarily someone with sunshine and smiles all the time. So positive emotions matter to me, but at a different level to my brother. And again, for each of you individually, each of these factors, each of these elements will matter for you differently. But as we're going through these, so just in terms of positive emotions, just on a scale of 0 to 10, just think about now, how are you feeling in terms of your own positive emotions at this moment in time? Are you kind of at 0? Are you at 10? Just score yourself. Don't share this. This is just for your personal reflection. When it comes to engagement is around the extent to which we're absorbed and immersed in what's going on around us. So concepts such as mindfulness encourage us to be immersed and absorbed in our in our body at the time, in terms of how we're feeling, what our energy levels are, what we're thinking about, how kind of active our brain is, whether our body's stiff or relaxed, or how our body's feeling. And absorption and immersion in activities in our day-to-day lives as well can be thinking about actually being aware of our surroundings, aware of our interactions. The opposite of this is when we often kind of run kind of blind, kind of just feel like we're doing stuff without noticing how we're doing it or what's happening around us. We kind of feel a bit like in a bit of a bubble, but not in a kind of good bubble. And we know from research that when people feel that they're kind of immersed and absorbed in their activities, and they find the opportunities, they feel that they report high levels of well-being. There's a correlation there. So we can get this not just from maybe doing our work in chunks of time where we're feeling immersed and focused on the work that we're doing, but we can get this also in terms of maybe activities such as puzzles or baking. That's why baking can feel good, because you get this, most of us are fully engaged and immersed in what's happening. And what I find as a challenge for most of us, particularly when we're tired and we have low energy, it's harder and harder for us to get immersed and absorbed in what's happening. With a lot of technology, a lot of us are using technology in new ways and in levels we've never done before in the last 12 months. And we're still learning, finding our way here. A consequence of this is that a lot of us have got multiple things that are pinging and stimulating us at any one time. We're getting information from Teams or Zoom or chats and email and WhatsApp groups, through news stories, you name it, Twitter, social media. It's coming at us in lots of different areas, and it's increasingly difficult for us to be fully immersed and absorbed in what we're doing in time. And I would just want you to kind of be aware of that and encourage you to think about actually to what extent, again, this is a scale of 0 to 10. The question to ask you is, to what extent do you feel that you have the opportunity to be immersed and engaged in things that matter to you? So that could be a work perspective, that could be an outside perspective, a home perspective during this week, so the last week. Just think about that. So what extent have you been able to be immersed and absorbed in, focused in activities that matter to you? And that could be work activities, others. And if you're getting constantly distracted or others, we'll talk about strategies for dealing with that in a little bit. Third element is relationships. So these are our interactions with other people. We're social beings as humans. One of the biggest predictors of kind of poor levels of well-being, of distress, is actually loneliness. So in terms of a really strong correlation between the two. And opposite, when people feel that they've got friends in the workplaces, that's a kind of predictor of feeling happy at work. When we feel we've got friends in our personal life, that people who care about us, that's a very strong predictor of reporting good levels of well-being. And so here you might want to think about, to what extent are you connecting or have the ability to connect with people that matter to you? Again, you can think about that from a work perspective or from a home perspective, and score yourself on a scale of 0 to 10. So what extent are you able to spend time? Are you connecting with people that matter to you? And again, when I'm saying spending time with, most of us, we're doing this virtually rather than in person, unfortunately. We'll also be aware of negative impacts of negative relationships. You might know people who are mood hoovers. Some people refer to them as, people who kind of actually suck energy out of you and suck energy out of other people. And again, you might want to think about to what extent are you spending time with those people? Can you change how you spend time with people, or can you maybe be compassionate and understand about why those individuals are acting in a way that kind of drains you of energy? It could be something to explore and think about there. So that's your relationships, our connections with people that matter to us. Fourth element is around meaning. So it's around, are we doing things that are meaningful and purposeful? Again, you can think about it professionally and personally as well. So when we do things that are meaningful and purposeful, we feel kind of alignment. We feel that we're doing something that matters. And when we do this as individuals, as sentient human beings, it gives us a sense of fulfillment. It gives us a sense of satisfaction. It kind of fills us up. It boosts our energy levels. Again, there's a strong correlation between people who report that they're doing meaningful activities during a week and them reporting levels of well-being. There's nothing more soul destroying than doing work or activities that we do that you feel there's no purpose or point to. And one of the things that you can do in terms of amplifying this within your colleagues is seeing to what extent do they feel that they have opportunities to get feedback on the activities that are meaningful, impactful for other people. So to what extent do they feel the activity they're doing has a purpose to them and meaning to them? To what extent can you collect stories or data or feedback to kind of back that up? Can you have coffees with some of your stakeholders? Can you show them satisfaction reports? Can you get anyone who's organising this conference? When you get the feedback from this session, it'll be amazing to kind of see about the contribution you're making to other people. Often we don't have the opportunity, we don't give ourselves the time or the space to think about whether what we're doing is meaningful and purposeful. And again, a lot of us, when we think about this element of guilt I talked about, it's because we're juggling multiple personal and professional tensions and we're not feeling we're doing them well. But if we take a step back and actually think that we're doing our best we possibly can because we care about our work and we care about our family members, and just doing your best, that's meaningful in itself. But we don't often necessarily give ourselves that time and space and permission to think about that in that way. The fifth element is around accomplishments. Again, when we're busy, when we're low energy, when things are happening, we spend our time focusing on the next thing to do rather than actually thinking about what we have achieved. So we look at our to-do list as a sign of failure rather than a sign of accomplishment in terms of ticking things off. And again, as human beings, we like to feel that we're accomplishing things. We like to feel that we're achieving things. Organizationally as well, we don't often spend the time to kind of recognize each other's accomplishments. We don't necessarily recognize to celebrate those achievements, those small things as well as the big things. So something you can do here is around actually starting meetings or sharing stories about things that have gone well, positive things that have gone well in terms of accomplishments. And I think it's something, again, we tend to underestimate the importance and value of it. It can feel weird to start talking about things and accomplishments in those circumstances. It can feel very performance orientated, but trust me, if you experiment with this, it can feel good, and it can feel good for yourself. Writing down next to your to-do list, just think about the things you've achieved that day and the progress you've made, and even the smallest possible things, you'll surprise yourself. I bet it might feel weird, but just trust me with it. And then the last element, the sixth, the kind of plus, is health. So if you're looking at our well-being, looking at our ability to manage ourselves during times of uncertainty and change, we need to kind of look after our health, and that is our sleep, our exercise, our nutrition, and keeping on top of any medical conditions we have, either mentally or physically. So in terms of maybe that might involve doing rehab or taking certain medication, whatever. But if we don't look after those kind of hygiene factors, those individual factors, they'll all have a knock-on effect in terms of our well-being. And so my invitation to you in terms of sharing this model is just to think about how it impacts on you from a well-being perspective, but think about how it can impact on your colleagues as well. And thinking about, actually, as a team leader, to what extent do you have opportunities for people to have some laughter and fun in terms of what they're doing? To what extent do you give thanks to people and send those bits which can foster positive emotions? To what extent do you create time and space for people to be engaged in their activities? So do you kind of allow people to turn themselves off from Teams, or have focused Wednesdays mornings where they don't have emails or something like that? To what extent are you allowing people to have that engagement, absorption in what they're doing? To what extent are you able to boost opportunities to connect with each other informally for those relationships? To what extent are you getting feedback from others, people showing that actually the work that people are doing matters and are meaningful? And to what extent are you, as a team leader, maybe connecting with your colleagues and reminding them about why you're doing the things that you're doing? And then lastly, to what extent are you celebrating the accomplishments that you're all doing, the fact we're all standing, the fact you're logged onto this, the fact you're still curious about this after a year of what we've been going through, is an accomplishment in itself. Creating and protecting the time for your own development and learning is an accomplishment. Yet I doubt many of you will see this in this way, but I invite you to do that. And I've talked about kind of giving thanks in terms of the importance of that and how you can boost your relationships. So one of the quickest things you can do, and I invite everyone after this email, after the session, to maybe go and send a note of thanks to someone. And if you want to supercharge the thanks, not just saying thanks for such and such, go a bit deeper and say, thank you for doing this activity. I really noticed you appreciated how you synthesized some research in the report that you wrote, or I really appreciated how you encouraged your colleague in that team meeting. Invest that extra sentence, and it can kind of like kind of quadruple the impact of that thank you note. When you thank someone, you feel better yourself as well as thanking others. I don't think organizationally we thank each other enough with sincerity, with authenticity, and it's something we can all do. So something you can immediately do after this session. Another way of shining a light on good things that are happening to us is by capturing three good things. And this is a website. You'll see a link here to 3 good things.io. And I built this, nothing to do with kind of my work kind of hat on, just from a personal perspective, to share with my other people and capture good things that are happening in our lives during the day. And it can be a really positive way of starting meetings with colleagues. And it can be a really positive impact in terms of something can have an impact on yourself. If you note down and record 3 good things that are happening to you each day. We have something called a deficit perspective in terms of the way our brains are wired. We focus on negative experiences. Negative experiences show up 4 times as much as positive experiences. So as a consequence of which, if you were to give feedback on something, you'll remember the negative things. You won't necessarily remember the good stuff, or you'll see it disproportionately negative. Similarly, when we're thinking about reflections on the day, a lot of us will just carry with us the negative stuff of the day without thinking about the good things. So one thing you can do is note down 3 good things at the end of the day. A diary study that did this, and this was, again, 15 years ago, but it's been replicated, shows that people who did a 2-week intervention where they just noted down 3 good things, and they felt better at the end of this day in terms of their well-being. And a month later and 6 months later, they also found that those individuals reported lower levels of sickness absence as well. So they're kind of, we know there's a relationship between feeling good and well-being and the autoimmune system as well. So that's something to think about. If you don't do that at the moment, starting sessions with 3 good things is a great thing. And what I'd encourage you to do now, again, on the chat function as we're going through, and I don't need these all relayed as we're going through, but it'd be great if you could just share with other people in this session something that's good that's happened to you in the last 24 hours. It could be a cup of coffee you've had, could be a smile from someone, it could be a hug, could be a conversation, it could be anything. Just share now with others on the message boards, an invitation for you to share something that's good that's happened to you in the last 24 hours. And so hopefully you're kind of thinking about that, reflecting on it, on good things that are happening to you. I mentioned I'll share with you some action-based kind of ideas that have taken control of your day and taking control of your job. Now, again, these aren't rocket science, and most of the ideas I'm sharing with you aren't rocket science. They're things that we know have got really good evidence base behind them, but we don't always necessarily find the time to do it, or the inclination to do it. So I'm sharing these with the reminder to keep doing the things if you're doing some of these, and maybe introduce some new things in your toolkit. And again, you can share this with your colleagues. The number 1 is plan your day. So before, a lot of us will just dive into our email straight away, or pick up you might even do that on your phone before you've even opened your laptop or fired up your desktop. Yet we know that can hijack us and hijack our thinking. So having a clear plan of what you want to achieve in that day, maybe looking at your diary where you want to spend your energy, can be a really effective way of setting yourself up. It also is a reminder just at the start of the day that you're in control of what's happening, rather than the other way around, which often feels that you're just constantly in response mode, kind of battling back kind of requests for your time and energy. Planning your day gives you that opportunity to reflect on how you want to be, the things that matter, and what you want to achieve. The other thing, and you're doing this kind of by coming to this session now or watching this session, schedule important but non-urgent tasks. So it's very easy to kind of do things that were important to us but no one's crying out for, to just when we're being busy, to just forget about those activities. Yet we know that people who report being both effective and productive and feeling in control of their days, they tend to have protected, or very good at protecting, time for things that they know they need to invest in, but no one else necessarily is crying out for. So it could be learning and development such as this. It could be report writing. It could be researching and keeping up to date with certain activities. It'll be personal to you, but it'd be around really, really good at protecting that time. And I find when I share this with people, they say, I can't do this. I've got too many competing demands. When you tell people that you can't do something or attend a meeting because you're protecting time for something else, most people respect that, as long as you do it. What can get in the way is when you say I'm protecting time for this, but then they find that you're actually responding to emails or doing something else. So I find that most colleagues are very supportive of people protecting their time, providing they actually use it for the time that they said they're going to. The third thing to think about is engaging in short bursts of time. I appreciate this is the longest kind of an hour-long session together, but ideally, if you're setting yourself up for work, what I'd encourage you to explore with maybe working in 15, 20-minute blocks with a clear intention about what you want to achieve in that 20-minute block. It could be responding to emails. It could be being focused on a Teams call. It could be listening with intent for this session. But most people tend to work well in 15, 20-minute block cycles. Some can do 25 minutes. Some can work 50 minutes at a time in one go. That's great. Find what works for you, but set yourself up to work in those little chunks rather than necessarily just sitting down and not moving for the entire day. And one you can do is reward your kind of those bursts of activity by a stretch, by an opportunity to go and grab a coffee, to do a stretch break in the way that you did, maybe hopefully you invited to before this session. Give yourself kind of rewards for achieving something, again, after those 25-minute blocks of work. And then the other thing that we can all do is turn off our notifications and avoid distractions. So again, as I mentioned, there's loads of things that ping and pong at us every day. I don't know about you, but I definitely find them. And I find that it's really helpful for me when I want to feel like I'm more in control of what's happening. I kind of turn off all notifications and only kind of look at them when I want to. I'm still going to respond to them. Again, if people trust you to respond to emails, if you say you're going to do them within a certain time, as long as you're clear on those boundaries when you're going to do it, it's fine, you'll get to them. You don't need that pop-up alert, because what happens is that your attention, even if you don't respond to that email or that ping from a WhatsApp group, part of your brain's used up in that activity. Part of your brain's then thinking about what that's related to, even if you're not consciously aware of it. So really think about to what extent do you do this. And then the other thing to do, and again, some of you will have this, is have a really bomb-proof, when I say bomb-proof, someone that you really trust to capture your to-do list, your to-do items, not having them scattered around everywhere, because what you'll find is you'll keep them in your head, and our brains aren't very good at keeping these things in our minds at all, and it takes up a massive amount of energy for us, and it's really tiring. So one way of kind of combating this is just to have a really clear, could be a diary, it could be something physical, it could be something electronic. I use Trello boards. I find them really helpful, Trello, as a way of kind of capturing my to-do lists. There's loads of things out there, experiment, explore, but just have something that you use to capture all the things that you need to do. And you might want to think about your personal and your professional things. Again, a lot of us think that we can only think professionally or personally for our to-do list, but our brain doesn't distinguish between them. They're still tasks, they're still things we're trying to remind ourselves to do. So in my Trello boards, I've got work items, but I also have personal things as well. And I find that when I experimented with it, I find that was just a good way of me just knowing that I was going to get to both those activities at some point, rather than ruminating and worrying about them during the day. So this is like, a lot of us have this virtual ball of string in our heads of these different things we're thinking about at this moment in time, and it's a mess of tangled. It's just a massive energy to sort these out. Having somewhere really clear to put your to-do items can have a really positive impact. And just to highlight, at the bottom of these slides, there's a link here where there's some more involved discussion and research around each of these different elements of some ideas to practice. So again, if you're interested in these, then do follow that link when you get access to these slides. So we're coming towards the end of this session, and I'm kind of excited now to kind of invite you to do an experiment to improve your own well-being. And again, you can think about doing this with your potentially with your colleagues as well. And this exercise that I'm going to share with you comes from an activity that I've developed in some digital tools from our website, and I do with groups as well. And so I'm just kind of, I suppose I'm peeking behind the curtain here and sharing this with you all to try and see if this resonates with you or not, in terms of actually trying to make a small, impactful, positive experiment to improve your own well-being. And to do this, I want you to think about picking one of the elements of the PERMA model. So I asked you to kind of score yourself out 0 to 10. You might have done that physically, you might have done that mentally, you might not have done that at all, you might have ignored me and done something else. That's fine. I respect that. What I'd like you to do just now is just to think about one element of that PERMA model that you can you'd like to focus on, so have an experiment on. So it could be around positive emotions or engagement. So for me, I'm thinking about jumping out meaning. So one of the things that I want to do is collect more meaning in terms of these presentations that I'm giving like this, about having an impact with people, that I'm spending my time in the right space. So meaning is something that jumped out. So that's what I'd pick now if I was in your shoes. And then I want you to pick a word that jumps out related to that. So again, for me, for meaning, for my pillar, I'm thinking about impact. So in terms of actually, is the things that I'm doing, is where I'm spending my time and energy at this moment in time, having the impact that I want it to? Because if not, I should maybe spending my time doing something else. So that's how I'd use it. So if you go through this, you might pick positive emotions, and you might think laughter and joy is something that's missing from me. That's what I want to invest in. Just think about that word now. And if you haven't got a word that jumps out at you, pick your own. And I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or so just to reflect on that, of that word, and reflect on why you've chosen it as well. Why does it matter to you? Tell yourself that story. So hopefully now you've picked a pillar and you've picked a word. And what I'd like you to think about is how much of this kind of do you have, and how much of this would you want? So you might want to do the last bit of what would it look and feel like to be at the level that you want to, at a later stage. But very quickly for me, when I'm looking at meaning, I might want to think about how much of this do I have. So I'd say probably 6 or 7. I'm very lucky that I get a lot of this, but someone that's really, I find this has an impact on my energy levels and where I invest in them. So how much of this I'd like an 8 or 9 in terms of feeling that the work I'm doing is meaningful and impactful. So what would this look and feel like? Actually, I'd get more stories and speak to more people about who's benefited from some of the work and the ideas that I've shared with people. So I've got that kind of those examples to mind. And again, some of you this might be very different. So you might have chosen joy. How much of this do you have at the moment? You might be 4, feeling not very joyful. How much of this would you like? I'd like an 8 or a 9. What would this look and feel like? Opportunities to have laughter and connection with other people. And so just have a sense of what that would look like for you. And then the last challenge, and I'm going to come to the end of this now to kind of leave you with this challenge, this invitation at the end of this session, is I want to give you a budget of 10 minutes a day or an hour a week to experiment, to make a change, to move more to where do you want to be, saying where you are currently to where you want to be. I'm going to give you a budget of 10 minutes a day. And the reason I get you to start small comes back to this idea of energy that we talked about at the start of today's session, in the fact that making a change, taking control of our circumstances takes energy. And one of the ways to do this, to build sustainable habits, is to find the smallest, most positive change you can make and then amplify it. So my commitment, and again, I'm doing this live with you now, I'm just making this up as we're going along. One of the things I'm going to do is think about following up with 2 workshops that I delivered last week to getting some more feedback and impact for those workshops, to chase the questionnaires that I sent out, but also to have a conversation with some people about how they've gone. That will take me maximum of an hour to do that, and I'm going to do it because I want to bring more of that meaning, that impact in terms of my life. So that's what I want to do. And I think saying you just need 2 minutes to be able to do this exercise. And I'm just leaving now, I'm just finishing now with that exercise, which I hope you found useful. I just want you to think about how are you going to boost your well-being. I want to invite you to do that. And I want you to think about what conversations, based on the material today, you could have positive conversations with your colleagues. So that's what I'd like to it's an invitation for you to do that, to create that time and that energy to look after yourself and to look after those around you. So I'd like to say thank you so much for your time and energy and interest in today's session. Please do kind of reach out to me. Very happy to respond to any kind of questions as they come about. Thank you so much. And I'm not sure how it works now in terms of whether I have to kind of finish now and finish today's session and got something else to dive into, or I can stay around and have some further questions if people have anything to come through. So I will defer to John to let me know what's allowed or not in the circumstances.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Unfortunately, that is you done.
Perfect.
That was absolutely brilliant. I don't know where to start with how much I've got out of that. I love the positive psychology, the me, we, us diagram, superb, the lighthouse thinking, and the buoyant well-being, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Such a good analogy. The PERMA model as well. I've not seen that before. So I've made a note to do a bit more reading around that. And just so you know, I did do the exercise. I chose accomplishment and achievement. And from then on, I got stuck because I decided there was a lot of thinking I needed to do about that. So that's something for me
That's
to
perfect.
go
That's
away with.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
but no,
amazing.
really good session, Rob. So thank you so much for that. Okay, yeah, you're getting some really positive feedback on here, Rob, so brilliant. Yeah, thank you again, Rob. So the materials are available to download from the delegate bag on the conference webpage for those who wish to. I certainly are going to be downloading that one. If anybody wants to get in touch with any of the speakers this morning, you can do so by emailing mindfulemployer@leedsmind.org.uk, and they will get in touch with us and let us know that you wish to speak to us. You can also think about joining the Mindful Employer Network, and there's a link in the delegate bag around that as well. So you should have all booked on to the afternoon workshops in advance, but if you haven't, there's still spaces available, so you can use the links to go on to that. The workshops will start at 1:30 on the dot, so that's when you need to be there for those of you who are going to get involved with those. That is, I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear it from me today, so no more from me. So thank you everybody for your participation and for the questions, and thank you again to all of the speakers. So go and have some lunch and chill out a bit before the afternoon session. Thank you everybody.